going to talk about tiny women and driving big SUVs. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do that, okay? Just thought I'd get you there, okay? Let's see, let me get all my paraphernalia out here. There we go. And get myself a little bit situated. If you have your Bibles, I'd like for you to turn to the Gospel of Luke, chapter 23. Luke 23. And we're gonna pick it up there. Last week, before we launched off in all the picnic fun, Matt gathered us all together, and there he is on the platform out there and sharing about Luke 22, bringing us, keeping everything rolling in the same direction here. And so I want us to get there. I'm going to also, so once you get to chapter 23, put your thumb in there. Then I'm going to go just pop over very quickly to Ephesians chapter 4, verse 14. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 14. So just as a preliminary way, and after today, I'll probably not say this again, because I think most of you get it by now. I'm just trying to, for 20 years teaching philosophy, and I say this, and I've had not the pastor here. Daniel is, and these guys are, Matt and the rest of the elders are. They are the ones that God has given the authority to establish the faith and practice in this congregation, and one that I totally respect in there. So if I say something different, like really different, if I say something wrong, okay, there's no competing here. They're the ones who are the pastors and elders, okay? I am not. I'm just trying to give you my position here, okay? So, but I don't want you to just disregard me and say, well, heck, what am I here for? You know, it's like, I don't want you just to throw me out. I mean, I think I have something to contribute. Anyway, I do want to say that. I probably won't say that again. But today's message I call Standing Your Ground in a Shaky World. Does that sound relevant? Standing your ground in a shaky world. And just as an introductory comment before I get to the Ephesians 4 passage, this point in Luke, we're now getting into what many would be considered the very dark period right now. And as a result, the Lord is thrust in the middle of all of this chaos, this social chaos that's going on. Rome clashing with Israel and scribes and priests and prefects and Herod the Tetrarch, and all of this is being just slammed together in these final hours of our Lord Jesus. And watch what he does in the middle of all this clashing coming together. Talk about a shaky world. You're going to hear stuff in here that you think, well, that's today. That's us. That's today. And this is really amazing stuff. So standing your ground in a shaky world. So now we're in these final times of the Lord before he goes to the cross. Now, I'll leave that there. Ephesians chapter 4, and I want to kind of set the tone with this passage. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 14 says, so that we may no longer be children, tossed to and fro by the waves and carried about by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness and deceitful schemes. In other words, the Apostle Paul, when he wrote the book of Ephesians, is trying to get us to get anchored in God so that when stuff hits the fan, you know what I'm talking about. When stuff hits the fan and you're feeling like you're on shaky ground, how ought you to behave? How ought you to be? This is really important stuff. And by the way, for those of you who work in government jobs or jobs where there's corporations and they got this enlightened ideas and enlightened attitudes that really go against your faith, you're going to want to listen to this, Okay? I know I worked for a college, the state of California, and so it's really important that you understand to get your roots in God, anchored in God, so that the stuff we just read, where it says, by waves tossed to and fro, by every wind of doctrine, by human cunning, by craftiness and deceitful schemes. How many know that is all flying out there today? That's nothing new. In fact, one might even argue it's intensified and even gotten wider, So I want you to hear what's going on here. I'm not trying to talk about all the things we're against. I'm trying to talk to you about being rooted in God so that whatever swirls around you, you are rooted in God. Okay? So let's take it from there, okay? I'm going to start with, let's see, starting at Luke 23, verses 1 through 5. I'm reading out of the RSV, Revised Standard Version. And I call this first point, this first paragraph, Pontius Pilate being played. You know what I mean by being played, right? Now, there's a difference between being played and getting played. All right? Understand there's a difference. Pontius Pilate is being played. Now, just a quick word about Pontius Pilate. Who is he? Pontius Pilate, and it's been argued historically two ways within the vernacular of Rome, and that is that he is considered to be a prefect or he's considered to be a procurator. Okay, different and apart from somebody called a proconsul. Now, this is all Roman structure. Prefects, procurators are sent from the throne of Caesar. Caesar's actually sending them to an area to do some ruling and governing. A proconsul is sent by the Roman Senate. That is not sent by Caesar. But the Roman Senate sends somebody out there. Now understand, Pontius Pilate is a prefect. He's a procurator. He represents, his main interest are Caesar's interests. And in this case, it's Tiberius Caesar. Okay, so he gets sent to Jerusalem, to the Jewish people, to kind of govern these ungovernable people. Okay, so he goes there. So here's what it is. It says in verse 1, then the whole company of them, which is the rulers and the priests and the crowd, the mob that was there earlier in chapter 22, and Matt covered that last week, they came over and are now standing before Pontius Pilate. They're no longer standing before the Sanhedrin, okay, but now, which is the Jewish governance body. But they're now over in the Roman side, and they want to now bring Jesus here. Then the whole company of them arose and brought him before him, meaning Jesus, before Pilate. And they began to accuse him, saying, we found this man misleading our nation and forbidding us to give tribute to Caesar, and saying that he himself is Christ, a king. All right? That's the accusation they're bringing to Pilate. And Pilate asked him, are you the king of the Jews? And he answered, and watch the way Jesus behaves through this whole thing. And he answered him, you have said so. What? What kind of answer is that? You have said so. Then it goes on, it says, then Pilate said to the chief priest and the crowds, I find no guilt in this man. But they were urgent. Would you circle the word urgent? If you got your Bibles, I'm going to ask you to circle 4 or 5 words here. And what I wanted you hear is the growing intensity of their language, the growing intensity of their verbs and adjectives. Just what they're going to say. And it says right here, the scriptures say, I find no guilt in this man. Verse 5 says, but they were urgent, saying, he stirs up the people, teaching throughout all Judea, from Galilee in the north, to Jerusalem, to this very place. So now they're coming right at him. All right? So here's the first thing. What did Jesus do? He's brought in. There's the mob. There's the leadership. There's everybody else. And there's Pontius Pilate and Rome. And he's thrown in the middle of this whole thing. And these guys are coming with well-crafted words. I had a privilege just recently. I got to, and this is just, it was an amazing experience for me. I got to do research for an amicus brief. Anybody know what an amicus brief is? Okay? An amicus brief is a friend of the court. I was asked by China Aid in Midland, Texas, to do research for an amicus brief where it was 501c3s. For those of you who know what those are religious nonprofit organizations or nonprofit organizations going against. Has anybody ever heard of Xavier Becerra in the state of California? He was a former attorney general. He's now part of the Biden administration. I got to do research and turn to a lawyer in Washington, D.C. to write up an amicus brief. I am so amazed at lawyers because they have to craft their words succinctly. They have to be so clear about what they're getting at. They don't do throwaway terms. When you do constitutional law, when you study law, when you study theology, when you study philosophy, there's no throwaway language. In other words, you don't do that kind of stuff. Everything you say has to be intentional and purposeful. Okay? So here it is, and I got to be a part. By the way, we won the case. You know, and that was a case in the U.S. Supreme Court. And the 501c3s C3s beat Xavier Becerra and the state of California, and they had to renege. They had to pull back. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. But the very fact to be in that stuff and see how language has to work. I mean, you can't play with the language. When I read this here, what they did, what the religious leaders of the time did, with the scribes and the crowd, the mob, what they did is they crafted very tight language here before they presented it to Pontius Pilate. And there's three things that I want you to notice that he had. Let me get to those three things now. First of all, they crafted an accusation that was against Israel. He's misleading our nation. That was the first charge. The second charge was against Rome. They're covering all their bases here. Okay? By the way, if you just think about some of the litigation that's been going on, even here in our time, you're going to see all the same stuff at work. The second accusation is against Rome, forbidding tribute to Caesar. Oh, really? And you kind of have to wonder, when did they ever care about tribute to Caesar? You know, that's kind of unique. And then the last one, which I think is kind of it actually is a claim against Christ on both Israel and on Rome, where they say that he claims to be the Christ, a king. So the Christ word, that just totally deals with Israel. But a king, that now touches Rome. Okay, so this is what now I want you to appreciate the entire drama that's unfolding at this time. And it really is, it is purposeful, it is intent, it is, they urgently are pleading, but watch how the language continues. And it goes on to say here, but Pilate, he goes ahead and does an interrogation. Pilate says, I don't find anything wrong with this guy. You bring these charges, and there's nothing to them. They are without substance. What are you doing? So he's getting it. Have we heard other things, investigations, that end up empty? This happens all the time. It still happens to this very day. So he says, I find no guilt in this man. Now, the curtain's falling on these guys, and they don't like it. So they do something which is what we call an ad hoc claim. An ad hoc claim is a claim that they didn't originally put out there, one of the three claims. But now they realize that even though they put out their best claims, it's not working. And they're seeing Jesus kind of slip from their fingers, right? And they create this ad hoc claim, this kind of off-the-cuff claim. And they say, well, wait a second. That guy has been disturbing people all the way from Galilee down here to this place in Jerusalem. Now what they're doing is they're appealing to the scope of his agitation, which, by the way, which is also the reason for the book of Acts. If you read the book of Acts, you're going to find out that everywhere Christians went, there was turmoil. And they used that basis to try to make Christians stop preaching, stop teaching, stop talking. In other words, they try to silence them. So here it is, this ad hoc claim that the scope of Jesus' agitation was all the way from Galilee down to this. Now, let me just do something here. This is my Josephus book. This is not the complete works of Josephus. Flavius Josephus. I love those. If there's any pregnant ladies here, I'm sorry, birthing parents. I'm sorry. Okay, if there's any pregnant ladies here and amiable husbands, Flavius Josephus. What a cool name. It beats Eddie. Why couldn't my mom call me Flavius? It should be like, going to school and little Flavi's here, man. It's like, that is so cool. Flavius Josephus is Jewish. And he was born in the year AD 37, so that means it was 4 years after the time Christ had been crucified. So he's a little late, but he was a very talented man and became a general in the Jewish army. And in the year 70 AD, when Rome fell, he happened to be standing at the walls of Jerusalem, calling them out, calling his own people out, saying, look, you're not going to last this one. I'm out here with the Roman army. And they're getting ticked off by the hour. And I think you guys got to give it up. Well, what happened at the end was horrific. It was unthinkable, okay? But Josephus writes, and his completed works are 2 volumes. One is called Antiquities, and the other one is called Jewish Wars. Look what he says in Jewish Wars, just so that you get a feel of what is Pilate up against. Watch this. Jewish Wars, Book 2, Chapter 9, Sections 2 and 3. Ready? As prefect of Judea, that's Pilate, Tiberius sent Pilate, and he introduced into Jerusalem by night and under cover the effigies of Caesar. What is an effigy? If you held out to me a coin, if you had a quarter, whose face is on that quarter? Anybody know? Is it George Washington or something? Yeah, Washington? Okay. Somebody's going to have to give me a quarter. No, anyway. But that's an effigy. That imprint there, that's an effigy. That's not permitted in Jerusalem. Okay? Especially under Exodus chapter 20, verses 4 and 5. It's not permitted. You cannot bring a graven image into the holy city. Pilate, wanting to please Tiberius, brings in these graven images to Jerusalem itself by night. Most people are sleeping and undercover. And watch this. And it says right there, of Caesar, which are called standards. He says, when day dawned, watch it, sun just rose, right? When day dawned, this caused great excitement among the Jews. For those who were near were amazed at the sight and considered that their laws have been trampled on. and they do not permit any of the graven images to be set up in their city. As a result of the anger of the city people, the people in Jerusalem, now watch this, the country people, the people outside Jerusalem, okay, the country Jews who lived outside the city, the country people started moving and flocked together in crowds. It looks like riots. Something's going to happen. It's going to bust loose right here. Okay? So they're starting in crowds. It says, for those who, they started in crowds. Okay. And they do not, I already did that part. Oh, yeah, there it is. It says, they rushed off to Pilate in Caesarea. Okay. Pilate, his headquarters was in Caesarea. Caesarea taken from the word Caesar, the city of Caesar. Okay. That's where the home base of Rome. The home base of Rome was not Jerusalem. It was in Caesarea. So the country people, all the city people are ticked off that this is happening. The country people share that anger. They go over to Caesarea. All right? They go over to Caesarea, and it says right here, and they begged him to remove the standards from Jerusalem and respect their ancestral customs, being Exodus chapter 20, verses 4 and 5. When Pilate refused, notice he's got this mob in front of him. I'm the prefect. I'm the procurator here. You're not. Right? So it says right here, it said, and Pilate refused. You want me to remove him? I don't think so. They fell, watch this. They fell prone all around his house in Caesarea and remained motionless for 5 days and nights. Get it? It's not like standing in front of Kavanaugh's house. It's around, and there is a massive crowd. And he says, I'm not moving them. They're not leaving. Showdown. They fall down. 5 days, motionless. When was the last time you see the protest like that? How about that one, huh? Then it goes on to say, I love this in the next part here. Watch this. Pilate's not finishing. You talk about escalating. Watch this. And all of this happened before we get here. This happened before Jesus happened. So you know, in other words, this is going to condition Pilate a little bit about the fervence of the Jewish people. He goes on and says, the next day, Pilate took his seat on the tribunal in the great stadium and summoned the mob as if he wanted to answer them. In other words, meet me over here at the stadium. I want to talk to all of you. Get away from my house. Meet me over here. I want to talk to you. And they think they're going to get it done. Then he says right here, he says, instead, he gave a prearranged signal to his soldiers. Got it? Prearranged signal to his soldiers to surround the Jews. And while the troops formed 3 rings around the Jews, 3 rings each, the Jews were dumbfounded at this unexpected sight. Whoa, talk about not waiting for that. Didn't see that one coming. Pilate declared that he would cut them to pieces unless they accepted the images of Caesar, and then nodded to his soldiers to draw their swords. Are you with me? Can you see it happening? Is it in your imagination? Because only they could have swords. To draw their swords. At this time, the Jews, as by concerted action, flung themselves on the ground in a body and bent their necks, shouting, that they were ready to be killed rather than transgress their law. Get this. Soldiers, they're all in front. All these Jews are going, oh my God, what did we just get ourselves into? What was their response? Baring their necks, laying down, and saying, if you're going to do it now. Gutsy? Gutsy? You keep escalating it. You keep escalating it. And here's what they do. They say, okay, we're calling you on this, and we're taking it to the next level. Then kill us. We would rather die than violate our law. Well, remember, all this happened before what we're getting to. Amazed at the intensity of their religious fervor, Pilate ordered the immediate removal of the standards from Jerusalem. And it's like, welcome, Pilate, to Jerusalem. What did you think this was? And so he got like a baptism of fire meeting these folks. And there was no people like them. You can, by the way, read all this good stuff in here. But it's not the Bible, but it really is great history. Anyway, so here's what's going on. Pilate says, I find no guilt in this man. And so now it's going to go to the next level. It's interesting because I call this next one, this next paragraph, bad company ruins good morals. The Apostle Paul said that in 1 Corinthians 15:33. Bad company ruins good morals. How many know that? You know, show me your friends, I'm going to show you who you are, right? Okay, birds of a feather, try it again. Birds of a feather flock together. You got it. And so here it is, the Apostle Paul saying, the people you hang with, the people you identify with, the people, and I can go on, that's what you're going to be like, or that's what you're like. So watch this. Verse 6. When Pilate heard this, he asked whether the man was a Galilean. Remember, they did this ad hoc claim. All the way from Galilee to Jerusalem, the guy's, agitating everybody. So Pilate does a very clever bureaucratic thing here. He says, wait a minute, is he from Galilee? And when he learned that he belonged to Herod's jurisdiction, this guy's not my problem. I don't have to have all these Jewish people coming around here challenging me. I'm going to send him to Herod because he comes from Galilee. It says they sent him over to Herod, who happened to be in Jerusalem at that time. Okay, they didn't have to send him all the way, transport him to Galilee. And it says, who was himself in Jerusalem at the time. When Herod saw Jesus, he was very glad. Really? Watch this. He was very glad, for he had long desired to see him because he had heard about him, and he was hoping to see some sign done by him. So he questioned him at some length. What's this here? But he made no answer. Jesus is now actually standing before Herod. Herod the Tetrarch. Herod the Tetrarch. He's standing before him. And now here's what's going on. We got another jurisdiction. Jesus, and all the mob is going over with him, and Jesus is dragged along, and now they're looking at Herod. And it goes on to say here, so he questioned him at some length, and he made no answer. Verse 10 says, the chief priest and the scribe stood by. Now circle this word. Remember, the first word was urgent. They are now kicking up their tone. They vehemently, now this is a definite display of emotions. They vehemently accusing him. And Herod with his soldiers treated him with contempt and mocked him. Then, arraying him in splendid clothing, he sent him back to Pilate. And Herod and Pilate watch this, became friends with each other that very day. For before they had been at enmity with each other. They were ill will. There was ill will. There was poison between the two guys. Now they're becoming BFFs. It's like, how cool is that, right? And so here's what's going on here. By the way, did you notice what Jesus said? What did Jesus answer to Herod? Nothing. How many know that sometimes that's your best answer? Somebody, especially if you know the person's a fool. How many of you know that we are constantly, I always love this in my college classes, my ethics classes, because we don't want to be judgmental. Millennials drive me crazy. I don't want to be judgmental. You judge every minute of the day. Every single day. I'm watching the girls, watching other girls walking down the hallway at the college. It's like, they do this face, it's like, or you go to the mall and you look at them, guys are all buff and everything. And my tats are better than your tats, We do that all the time. We cannot escape it. We are moral creatures. That's the nature of our being. And we cannot escape it. We could try to improve ourselves, but we cannot escape it. Even when you came into church, you started making some judgments, Who's that little Mexican up there, What's he talking about? Yeah. So, you start to do things. So what did Jesus? He made no threats. He actually answered nothing to them. But it's kind of like the Fifth Amendment. You have the right to remain silent. How many know people cannot force you to talk? That's actually been codified in our Bill of Rights, the Fifth Amendment, right? You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be held against you in a court of law. You have a right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be given to you. Do you understand these rights? Okay? It's like, never mind. So Herod goes into this thing of folly. He starts to treat Jesus with contempt and mocking him. And I have to think in 1 Peter 4:12 it says this, "Dear friends, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal that has come upon you to test you as though something strange were happening to you." Remember I talked about government workers who have this kind of enlightened corporations that you're working for that are forcing you to be a certain way, that are somehow coercing you culturally or coercing you in actual fact. They're trying to make you say something you cannot say. You know that. It violates your Christian faith. You cannot say those things. Well, how far are you going to take that? How far are you going to go with that? Or are you going to succumb to their loud and prevailing voices? What are you going to do? You see, I know I've been in that spot. Teaching in college for 20 years, got out just in time. But I get it. I get the pressure here, okay? So it goes on, it says here in verse 23. So it says Herod's judgment says, even Herod says he's not guilty, as we'll find out in verse 15. And then Pilate and Herod becomes friends that day. I'm going to give you, 5 things real quick. But because people wonder about friendships. When we think about friendships, you have to remember that friendships happen because that we're thrown together somehow. Maybe we work at the same place. Maybe we share the same hobbies. Maybe we do something, but some kind of event puts us together. And then we start to discover each other, and we find out we have the same values. We like the same things. We laugh at the same jokes, and on, which is a sharing of values. That's what makes friendship. If you ever want to read a good writing read C.S. Lewis on the 4 Loves. Fantastic writing on friendship. But here's another thing, too. And I'm going to just rattle these off, and I can't explain them. I wish I could do it. But there are 5 levels of communication. Okay, I'm going to just throw these out there. Level number 1 is cliche. Hey, how are you? Good to see you. Welcome. Cliche talk. Second one are facts. Hey, did you hear about the fire that was over in Silverwood? the facts. The third level are judgments about the facts. Wow, that's pretty bad that it happened, huh? Yeah. You're making a judgment. You said it's pretty bad. And then number 4 is your feeling about that facts. Man, I heard about the fire. It's really bad that it happens. Yeah, fires suck. It's terrible. So you're thinking, whoa, that's, you're like, and then there's the very 5th one, which is deep and honest. The stuff that makes friendship is number 3 and 4. That's what makes friendship, number 3 and 4. Okay? And it's so important to understand, when you start sharing values with people and your judgments about them and your feelings about those values, sometimes you could be cut off in an instant because I know where you're coming from. You're one of those people, right? How many understand what I'm talking about? But here you got Herod and Pontius Pilate on the same page, except Herod is a brute. The guy is a brazen savage. And read his story, read Josephus. And you got Pilate, who's there to express the interest of Tiberius. And he's more of a refined guy, but here they become close friends. That's an amazing thing that has happened for right there. And I'll get back to that in a second. Verse 13, Pilate then called together the chief priests and the rulers and the people. There's that mob again. It says, and said to them, you brought me this man as one who was misleading the people, and after examining him before you, behold, I do not find this man guilty of any of the charges against him. That's pretty clear, right? Neither did Herod, he says, for he sent him back to us. Look, nothing deserving death has been done by him. I will therefore punish and release him. Wait a minute. If he just did nothing wrong, why on earth are you going to punish him and then release him? Why don't you just release him? Well, a couple of reasons for that. One is that he could just be what we call a utilitarian. A utilitarian is one who says the greatest good for the greatest number of people. That's what a utilitarian ethics tells us. Greatest good for the greatest number of people. And that sounds pretty good. But now get the flip side of that. The ends justify the means. Whatever I could do to produce the greatest good for the greatest number of people, whatever means I need to do to get there, that is the moral thing. So one of the things, the failures of utilitarianism, is no justice. Because justice can get in the way of the majority. And so he actually writes this out here. So is he a utilitarian, or is he just a guy who's lost his way because he knows the Jewish people? And I think it's the latter. I think he's kind of lost his way. I think he has a moral compass, but because the voices are getting at him, he knows what they're capable of. And he's scared. He wants to do Tiberius' work, but he's scared of the mob. Now watch this, verse 18. And they all cried out together, away with this man, and release to us Barabbas, a man who had been thrown into prison for an insurrection started on January 6th. Oh, I'm sorry. I keep reading stuff. I'm sorry. Okay, I keep reading stuff into that. It's not there. Okay, started in the city for murder. Pilate addressed them once more, desiring to release Jesus. Notice his heart's desire. He knows he's not guilty, but he's got this crowd in front of him. What's he going to do? He's going to let him, it says right here, notice that in verse 18, it says, they cried out together. Circle that. They cried out together. They called urgently. They were vehement. They cried out together. Now in verse 21, but they kept shouting. It gets louder and louder and deafening. Think about you at your work. Think about you at your lunch lounge. Think about you wherever you're at. If you work for the U.S. government, or if you work for enlightened corporations, think about it. What do? Can you say this? Can you say that? Can you speak the truth? Think about that. Very important here. And it says right here, and they kept shouting, "Crucify, crucify him." A third time he said to them, "Why? What evil has he done? I have found in him no guilt deserving death. I will therefore punish and release him." But they were, are you ready for this? Urgent and demanding with loud cries. Can you hear it becoming deafening? It's chaotic. And am I right or am I wrong for standing my ground? It's getting loud, and it looks like there's more than me. Maybe I am wrong. Do you get it? How many ever get those feelings? I know those feelings. It's not like I'm familiar with them. I know those feelings. Okay? And then it says they crucify him, crucify him. Why? What evil has he done? They urgently demanding and that he should crucify him. And here's the most tragic clause in this whole thing, or tragic sentence in this whole thing. And their voices, what? Prevailed. They got what they wanted. We call that bullying, don't we? That's just being plain old bullies. Now, but how far are you willing to go to stand for the truth and say, you know what? I understand what you're talking about, but my faith will never let me go there. Okay? I'm not going there. I'm just not going there. Do you know what that means for your job? Do you know what that means for your pension? Do you know what that means for your future? Do you know what that means? Because we could bring the weight of an enlightened corporation, the weight of California, the weight of the U.S. government down crashing around you. What will you do? Get it? Does this sound relevant? Does all of this sound so relevant? And then it says, so Pilate decided that their demand should be granted. And he released the man who had been thrown into prison for insurrection and murder, for whom they asked. But he delivered Jesus over to their will. I'm going to go right to the conclusion here. In the conclusion, you think, well, how do we stand in a shaky world? Can I just tell you that God has given you a way to stand in a shaky world? First of all, at the end of the day, at the very end of the day, when you're faced with people who are yelling at you and spitting, and spitting hate and fire, what are you going to do? Are you going to back down? Are you going to stand your ground in a shaky world? God's people stand their ground in a shaky world. Come what may. Did you get that? Somebody clap. Somebody clap here. Folks, do not let this world bully you, intimidate you. I actually feel for Pilate. I'm thinking, this guy's trying to do Tiberius' bidding in Jerusalem, and he is up against something bad. And their voices get louder, and it gets more chaotic and more confusing. And man, how do you and I stand in the face of that? God gives us 4 things to stand on. I'm just going to list them. Someday I hope to have the time to develop it all the more. 1, he gives us his Spirit. You know in your heart, in your life, what God is saying to you. You know that. And don't deceive yourself about it. You know what God is saying in your heart. If you claim to be born again, you know what God is saying into your heart. He's not muzzling himself. He's speaking to your heart. But you're still hearing the clamors and the loud voice and the vehement and the urgent and the louder and louder and louder. You know what he's saying. 2, he gives you his word. That's what you have the Bible for. It's an objective reality. It's out here. It's not whatever I think about God. It's out here. And it speaks to me. And there's stuff that maybe I have a hard time with, but God will get me sorted. You get it? But it speaks to me. His word. Number 3, his saints. That's you guys. All of you guys. It's his saints. You help me stay grounded. Become part of discipleship course 1, discipleship course 2. Get into a group, do something. Get yourself grounded with the saints. Because sometimes when you're thinking crazy, somebody's going to say to you in a group, I could see Jeremy saying this, that's messed up, man. It's like, you think that? It's like, maybe I shouldn't be thinking that, So, and then lastly, God gives you shepherds. Daniel, Matt, the elders. And these guys, maybe they're a few steps ahead of you. But that's okay. Let them be a few steps ahead of you. And if it gets really, really shaky, and the world seems to just be collapsing, God, I got to talk to you, man, because it's really, how far should I go with this thing? How far should I go? Because I'm scared to death. I am really scared to death because it could mean my livelihood. And I don't know how far to go. Talk to one of the guys. Talk to one of the guys. The Spirit, the sword of the Word, the saints, the shepherds. Take them all in. And that will give you ability to stand on Jesus Christ, the rock, the solid ground. Amen? God bless you guys.